So when I was in college back in 19, it was the last century. It was literally the last century, I think, wasn't it? 1984 to 1988. We didn't have obviously all this technology. So when you and there was maybe one transcription book on the market of jazz trumpet solos. That's it. So when you wanted to do this, you needed to just put the tape recorder on and hit play and stop after a couple of bars or a couple of beats and learn the music that way. That's if you wanted to write it down or if you just wanted to learn it by ear. I wrote everything down mostly just because I'm just that type of person. I like to have it archived somewhere, and somewhere in my attic I have a folder about that thick of handwritten transcriptions, you know, manuscript. I still do that every once in a while, write with a pencil, you know. But it's helped me immensely. And one of the things that I would do is I would transcribe a Clifford Brown solo and then play along with him, like to Now's the Time, a blues solo. And then when the transcription ran out, I would just keep improvising. And for just a nanosecond, I almost sounded like Clifford Brown. For a nanosecond, almost. But the thing is, I look at it as sort of an osmosis thing, a conscious as osmosis. And I think of playing the jazz trumpet solo transcriptions as such an integral part of your jazz improv and trumpet playing, because you're getting technical facility. You're getting this facility, the fluidity under your fingers. You're figuring out articulation and tonguing and getting the agility here, flexibility-wise, to move on the trumpet, right? And all through the ranges and the octaves. And then you're also getting that harmonic concept of what these musicians were playing. And you're learning jazz standards. So you have all of that and even more packaged into that, you know, wherever, 1, 2, 3 page transcription. You know, there's the part about learning it, just simply just trying to get it under your fingers, and then to absorb that. You know, I would do a transcription and learn it top to bottom and try to internalize it. But some of those ideas wouldn't come out into my playing maybe a month, 6 months, a year. You know, it can take a while to absorb that type of information. So you're doing these transcriptions at the same time you're practicing you're simply practicing your major scales and your minor scales. You're getting the technique part of it. When people say, you know, when people do this and they're playing jazz and they're like, or somebody who doesn't know how to play jazz, and they're pretending, and you know, they're trying to, oh, I'm a jazz musician. They close their eyes and just start playing. I'm like, and I'm just playing what comes to me. That's not it. When you listen to people like John Coltrane and Dizzy Gillespie and Clifford Brown, these cats practiced. You know what I'm saying? They practice what they preach. You know what I mean? So there's a famous recording of Clifford Brown. I don't know if you know this, Stan. It's about 17 or 20 minutes of him practicing.
I think it's perhaps on YouTube, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I've heard a little bit of that. Yeah. Is there more than one, or just one, or?
I just have one continuous 17-minute or so recording of him in the practice room. Clifford Brown, one of the greatest jazz trumpet players that ever lived. You know, died when he was, I believe, Facebook's going to get me. I know it's like maybe 25. Somebody's going to correct me. But you hear him practicing, and then you put on one of his solos, and it's like, oh my gosh, he's playing what he practiced. Okay, so everything that I play right now, there can be a debate. Someone told me that Sonny Rollins, the great tenor saxophonist, was one of a handful of the true improvisers, right? When I get up on the bandstand and play, sure, I'm improvising. I'm composing on the spot. But the ideas that are coming, they're not just like coming from this, you know, magical place, filling up my brain and just, I've got all these magical things. No, I practice what I'm playing, you know, but it depends on the key, the atmosphere of where I'm playing, the group that I'm playing with, the tempo, the type of groove, that's going to affect what comes out of the horn. But rest assured, all the stuff, and I was noodling a little bit before Stan introduced me. I was just going around the horn playing some bebop, right? Like. Playing bebop licks and blues licks. That's not earth changing. That's not like some innovation I'm doing right there. I'm literally just practicing some technical things over the horn, right? And then I play sort of that way when it comes to playing a blues, right? And I tell you, one of the trumpet players I was probably most influenced by a little bit later on in life was Blue Mitchell. All right, everybody's familiar with Blue Mitchell? You have got to become familiar with Blue Mitchell because, like, I give some of my students, some of my younger students who are just kind of starting out, and they may not have a lot of technical facility and they may not have a lot of range. I give them a lot of Chet Baker solos, right? Because it's just from the standpoint of, I mean, harmonically, it's beautiful stuff, right? But from the standpoint of ease of playing, ease of access, right? I'm not going to give a student who's sort of just beginning. I'm not going to give them a Freddie Hubbard solo to learn. I'm not going to learn this solo, right? They may be able to learn, like, there may be 5 bars in one of his solos that's accessible, that's at the ability that this person can play. But the rest of it is going to be like double time and then 2 octaves high. Okay? It's just no reason. It's the most beautiful. I love Freddie Hubbard is to me the greatest trumpet player to ever live, with the exception of Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong is like, you don't even put him in these categories. He's his own category. But Freddie Hubbard, because he did it all, right? But I wasn't giving a beginner student Freddie Hubbard. Right? I would give them something that they can actually learn to play, right? And at their ability. That's still going to have some good harmonic content. It's still going to demonstrate jazz articulation like we like to do on the trumpet. And it's going to give you some basic general harmonic structure over these chord changes, right? So Chet Baker's good at that. And then another level, even more advanced harmony-wise, then you're looking at Blue Mitchell. Now, Blue Mitchell played with so many people. Chick Corea did a number of years with Horace Silver, right? And by the way, if you have any questions, I mean, I want to take some time at the end for some more detailed questions you have, but any questions at any time, just jump in about anything. My influences, how I what I do on this thing, to be able to do the things I do on this thing. Some of my favorite jazz, musicians, some of my favorite classical musicians, But anyway, here soon I'm going to pull up this, I'm going to share my screen with this Blue Mitchell solo and kind of give you a little bit of idea. When I'm teaching, I use these transcriptions and I use jazz standards, like Bye Bye Blackbird, Stella by Starlight, Take the A Train. I use these jazz standards to actually teach jazz theory at the same time, okay? And I use these standards and transcriptions to teach, like they're pulling from notes from this scale choice, right? So people say jazz improvisation is not about playing scales, right? It's not, but here's the thing, and trust me, it took decades for me to understand why teachers always told me, practice your scales. They used to tell me that when I was young, but never told me why. I kid you not. They never told me why, right? Well, except for the greatest teacher I ever had in the world, which is Tim DeWitt, trumpet player out of West Virginia. But most of the time, just practice your scales, right? And you don't ask why, you just do it. Well, the reason is you got to have some facility to get around your instrument, right? John Coltrane cannot play the way he played without him practicing just practicing the technical aspects of a horn. Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis. Miles Davis was at Juilliard for a little bit. My goodness, you don't get to Juilliard just from knocking on the door and say, "Hey, can I come in?" Right? You got to have some. You got to have some skill set there at the from the beginning. So, my man. So, get me distracted. Oh my goodness. All right, so I see he distracted me. I lost my Alan made me lost my train.
Yeah, you over here preaching. I had to jump in.
Oh man, are you out in Colorado?
I'm in South Carolina.
Oh, South Carolina. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, Zoom is great, man. Bring everybody together. I was a student of mine back to George Mason. Oh man, I think from like 13 years ago.
I was actually a student of both of you at the same time.
Right. That's awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And Alan, you're still in the service.
Yes, sir.
Right. How many years?
11.
11 years, man. Woo. And
yeah.
He's doing great. Great.
Yeah. Got over the hump. You're over the hump.
So much respect for this gentleman right here.
Thank you.
Yes, and if you haven't seen it, you have a recent YouTube, probably some sort of YouTube or whatever recording of you singing a standard. I can't remember what it is, but it sounds fantastic.
Uh-oh, watch out now. Watch out. Yeah. Multi-talented too. So, you need this technical facility to get, when people say, "Oh, he's just this person's a natural jazz player, natural improviser, or he just person plays by ear." Okay, but if you can't play this, if you cannot physically or technically play your instrument, you're not going to say anything, And so, I practice a lot of scales. I practice a lot of technique. With the other thing, the transcription I found really, really useful is forcing me to use the jazz articulation, what we call that jazz articulation, right? That da 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 da, that sort of thing, right? Because then you start to sound like Clifford Brown in a way that of your approach, okay? So yeah, Stan.
That was wonderful what you just said, but I wonder if there's a lot of people in my class and maybe out there and abroad watching Facebook or whatever. So like the idea of swing. So I mean the very basic thing, if maybe a band director is putting in front of the students a piece which is somewhat like jazz sounding, and they say you need to swing it, and so I think the very first thing that people are thinking about is uneven rhythm, like maybe quarter followed by an eighth note in a triplet feel, da 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 da. And sometimes that works, but sometimes that doesn't work. And I wonder if you could just briefly explain why that, especially what kinds of music that might work for, but what others that it might not work for, even if they're all jazz.
Well, it's when you listen to like a nice swinging Count Basie tune, right, or Duke Ellington tune that's like a medium groove, like that. Then yeah, you can apply that traditional triplet feel. Boo doo doo da doo, It's that straight. When they say, "Hey, it's the triplet feel," do da do da do 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 da, right? When you speed that up, just physically, technically, it's just not possible, right? It's hard to do. It's just really hard to do that triplet thing. So that's where, especially when the bebop thing, we started getting into that jazz articulation where you don't really thinking about like the swing triplet feel, but using the accents of the offbeats, right? Right. But then you smooth that out to make the notes the same length. start getting a little bit of that swinging feeling. Now Clifford Brown did a lot of things where he tongued a lot of the notes, even just notes back to back. I still can't get that exactly like Clifford Brown. Maybe when I retire from the Army, wait a minute, I did already. God, now I have time. I have no excuse. I have no excuse not to play it exactly like Clifford Brown. But the thing is, when you introduce something like that style of articulation, that style of jazz articulation, it changes a lot. It can bump you back a few steps to relearn something that you already know. Like, now that's all based on just C major scale. But using that jazz articulation, right, and making the notes nice and even, going at least, and that's what the beautiful thing about Clifford Brown and Freddie Hubbard. These guys, they just played everything so nice and even, right? But the transcriptions, I just can't stress those enough, right? And I would say again that the Clifford Brown and the Blue Mitchell are some of the best transcriptions you can find out there, and they're all over the internet. Now, there's also a debate. Some people say you don't ever write them down. Right? There are people in the camp, don't ever write them down. Just learn it by ear and move on. Right? That's awesome because you get ear training, right, and you learn it more organically. Nothing against that at all. Me being half my body into education, I like to have things written down for archive purposes, for teaching purposes, for analytical purposes, right? And so I want to show you something. I want to show you this. Blue Mitchell solo.
Oh, let me make sure I have.
Yes.
Let me make sure I have given you. Yeah, you have permission to share your screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Okay. All right. So, does everybody see that all right? This is Blue Mitchell solo from Condition Blue from a great Jackie McLean record called Capuchin Swing. Oh my gosh, if you don't have this record, you got to get it. It's swinging. It's mad swinging. Right? So then we have, so it's just this blues, the C blues, right? And this is a great example of him playing bebop style things, right? So we get to hear the 2/5 at the end, and he's playing G bebop scale, right? Because he's got the 2-5-1, all right? D minor, G7, down to C7. So over that 2/5, he's pretty much basing everything off of the 5 chord, the G7. So he uses the G bebop scale, right? Right? The G bebop scale. Right? That's a BBP is where he utilized the G bebop scale.
So I thought maybe I'm going to be the person to come in and ask the really stupid questions, because not stupid questions, but basic questions, to make sure that everybody can follow along, I think, if that's okay with you.
Yes, of course.
So you're saying that for a 2/5 in jazz, which the D minor 7 and G7 is a 2/5, you don't have to switch scales between the two. You can just use the G dominant bebop scale for both those chords.
Right. So let me show you something else, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Hold on. Okay. So this is an exercise that I came up with just to sort of get some practice on 2-5-1, right? Using the Dorian scale, right? So we have the G minor 7, C7, F major, 2-5-1. Over the 2-5 part, which is the 2-5, which is the most important part of the 2-5-1, right? Because remember, this 2-5 doesn't have to go to a 1. It can go to a different resolution. Keep it simple. It goes to the 1. Over this 2-5, if you want to talk about chord scale relationship, you can use the G Dorian scale over these 2 bars, or you can use the C dominant scale over these 2 bars, or you can use the C bebop scale, which is always from the dominant, over these 2 bars, right? Because it all comes from F major, right? You can play diatonically just using the notes from F major over the 2 bars, because it all comes from F major, all right? So I look at this as, someone look at this as 3 chords. I look at this as 1 sound, all right? It's the sound coming out of F major. To make it colorful, to make it jazz, to make it interesting, you can start using G Dorian sounds, or you can start using the bebop. So this goes up the G Dorian and comes down the C bebop. Right? And then I do this about 12 or 14 more times, and I just keep moving that, right? The second one, and then so 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th line down, I start with the C bebop scale the entire way, all the way down the octave. Oops. And then get myself back up to and do a upper or an enclosure to the 1. All right. So if I'm sitting on the piano playing, that G minor chord, then over this G minor chord, I can play notes from the F major scale. I can play notes from the C dominant scale because it's all modal, or I can just play the C bebop scale over the entire thing, right? And that's where, so we're getting out of sort of the transcription part of it, but that's where when we get back to that, the, I'll show you this example. Oops, let me see here. All right, I don't know how. Okay, let me see here. I'm still figuring out this screen share thing. So when we get back to the Blue Mitchell's solo, right? His solo and his blue solo in C. Right here on the 2, the D minor 7 G7, he starts playing the bebop on the D minor 7 chord, right? And then he states it right there. We get to the F7, he plays the F bebop, and then he plays the G bebop again, even before we get to back to the C7. Again, he plays it right here, and then I know he plays it a few more times. Right here in this craziness, he has a combination of the major and the dominant bebop. But what I'm saying is that if you look at you put a piece of music in front of you and there's lots of chord changes. Like take Stella by Starlight, right? It's a beautiful tune. Buddha, shudurida, shuda, blah, shubiya, right? You've got all these 2/5s going on in the piece. Beautiful. But you don't one of the students told me, man, Mr. Rittenhouse, there's so many chords on there. I don't know what to do. I said, well, let's just go by sounds, right? Look at the first 2-5-1. That's one sound. It's one set of notes that you can choose from, right? And just the notes aren't going to make your solo, right? It's the notes plus the rhythm that creates the melody, right? So I'm not going to say, okay, for this one, I want you to play the C major scale for this chord change. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say use the notes from this key center, right? Now, let's put them in a particular rhythm and see where we go from that. And see if we can resolve and end up to the key we need to end up and see if it makes sense or not, right? I think that's the best way to learn how to do this, right? It's not opening up one of the tens or 20s or 50 or so jazz books that are out there, right? I'm sure they're all great, but to me, you don't start that way. To me, you put on the music, you figure out the key, and you start creating rhythms. And that's the other thing I do with my students is that hold on a second. Something's going on with my computer. I have to quit here. I was just doing this the other day. I put on this blues and soul artist, kind of old school, and it was in the key of B flat minor, or concert A flat minor. And I told my student, all right, I'm putting a track on. I want you to start improvising. Well, what do I play? Well, just you have to figure. I didn't tell him the key or anything. I said, you figure out the key. Here's the groove. I want you to start blowing. So he was kind of flailing around a little bit, and so I kind of jumped in and helped him. I said, what's the key first? Figure out the key. So he figured out the key. Okay, now you got the key? Great. You don't have to play 18 notes. All you need to play is like 2 or 3 notes, but put it in a specific rhythm, right? To sort of add to what the groove is going on. That's all you need, right? I can get on the bandstand and just take 3 or 4 notes and play 3 or 4 courses over a blues, right? And I'll be all right. It may not be the most interesting thing after 2 minutes, right? You'd be like, okay, Kenny, that's nice. Let's play something else. But I'll be able to hang with the person who's on stage playing all that kind of stuff, right? And we'll be killing it. It'll be great. It'll be wonderful. But then someone else can come right behind it and go, beat up, bop, boo, lead up. And the crowd will also be tapping their foot. And that's just as good. You know what I'm saying? So, I know we kind of got off track here, but I think all of these solos, right? I have a whole folder full of like Blue Mitchell solos, right? That I've sort of collected. Again, this is from my educational side of it. I love collecting these things and just getting them all together, right? And just seeing what these cats are playing. But learning these solos, another great solo is one of Freddie Hubbard's most famous songs. Can anyone tell me? One of his most famous blues. He takes like, I don't even know how many courses, 7 or 8 or 10 courses or something like that. It's a G blues. It's from Ready from Freddie.
Ah.
Bird-like. Freddie Hubbard's Bird-like solo. It's one of his most famous. I don't want to say. Well, I think it's one of his most utilized and played transcriptions. It could be, in my opinion, it is. It's a classic. It's like the Arbans of jazz trumpet solo, and so I've got one of my students right now playing, and it's like 10 pages of stuff. But again, that's a great solo because he doesn't go anywhere. He doesn't go higher than D above the staff. He doesn't go any, and it's a blues in G, and he incorporates the G blues scale all over the place. It's probably the most perfect example of playing some bebop over blues. All right, and when you're playing these transcriptions, the first thing is just to play them. I tell my students to just, if it's hard, just approach it like you would approach any other solo or etude, right? Brant, Charlier, etude, whatever, anything. Just approach it that way. Play it slow, play it deliberately, play it accurately. Don't worry about swinging it. Don't worry about sounding like Freddie Hubbard or Clifford Brown or Louis Armstrong. I also do a lot of Louis Armstrong transcriptions. Don't worry about sounding those people. Learn the notes, right? Get it under your fingers, right? That's one part. The second part is technique, right? And technique can mean bending notes, shaking notes. Technique can be like half valving notes, all that kind of stuff. That's all part of technique, right? The goal is to play that with the recording, right? And no, we're not going to sound like Freddie Hubbard. We're not going to sound like Clifford Brown. We're not going to sound like Louis Armstrong. Those people were their own. Those cats were their own thing. But we can come close, right? Any questions so far about some transcribing and any pitfalls or any issues you all might have run into?
Kenny,
Yes, sir.
you mentioned earlier, before I joined in, something about um, like the composition in your vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
So like right now, in a way, I like to think of jazz improv as like learning a language,
Mm-hmm.
and talk about integrating this material into our vocabulary. We've got the 251 chord progression as a subject, and it's like, all right, this is what we're talking about. Now, what do you have to say? That kind of thing. And so right now we're having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We're basically kind of improvising, but we're using the language of the English language as our language.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on elaborating on that as far as it applied to jazz?
So say that one more time. Like it's
So
what are you saying exactly?
so like are you talking about the 251s and the chord changes over that? Um, and then you mentioned a few of these tools that we could use. We could use the
Right.
bebop scale. We could use the Dorian scale,
Right.
and like
Right.
vocabulary that we have that we can use. Like if we're gonna paint a picture of jazz, we're using primary colors or something like that. Like kind of
Right.
keeping.
Well, I mean, so we have the ingredients. We should all have the ingredients of the vocabulary, right? So, and that's it's a big umbrella. It's a large umbrella because we can all play we can all play our C major scales, right? But what I like to do sometimes also is Jamie Aebersold has I think it's volume 24, major and minor scales. Jamie Aebersold Improv Music Minus One series. Volume 24, major and minor, and it just I put on a key. I'll put on C major, and it's a groove. It might be a bossa groove, or it might be a straight ahead swing groove, and I'll say, okay, let's improvise, right? So everyone knows their C major scale, but what if someone has a major issue in improvising? What's the first thing that you would tell them to do, right? Because technically, what we have the vocabulary. If they're having problems improvising over that, then no, they don't have the vocabulary. They have the ingredients to the vocabulary, which is the notes from the C major scale to
Right.
utilize, right? So you've got the notes, and I want you to create some melody. So that one missing ingredient is the rhythm, right? Rhythm is everything, in my opinion. In my opinion only, rhythm comes before everything else, right? Because you can take, I can tell you on this piece, all you need to really play is the C minor pentatonic scale, 5 notes, right? Just 5 notes. Even if one what's that? 4 notes. One,
Hmm.
two, three, four. One, two. Yeah, one, two, 4 notes, right? If I say all you've got is these 4 notes, and you know, right, 4 notes, then you don't have to worry about anything else. All your job is now is to worry about rhythm. Where am I going to put those 4 notes rhythmic wise, right? And if you get really confident and you play in time, right, in the pocket along with the whatever groove, and you're actively creating some rhythms, as long as it's in the pocket, it's
Yeah.
going to sound fine, right? You'll be able to get up there on the bandstand and play with somebody who's been playing this many years and has like a wealth of knowledge and vocabulary and experiences. But you may have this much. But if you take those 4 notes and focus rhythmically on them, then you have every right to stand on that bandstand beside that next person, right?
Yeah.
Because jazz is not jazz equals this level of playing, or no, jazz equals uh, um, are you playing syncopated music that reaches someone, right?
Yeah.
And
Somebody told
interesting.
me.
So what I'm saying is and I tell my students this all the time. You don't have to, and I tell you, really young musicians there, you don't have to wait for 2 or 3 or 4 years of trying to learn this music to go actually play it with other musicians. No, you just have to be able to, first of all, play this sufficiently and efficiently, right? At whatever level. It doesn't even have to be at professional level, right? It just has to be at enough to get the notes out of the horn, right? You got to be able to do that successfully, and then incorporate a few of these rhythmical ideas, and you're on your way, right? Because if I go, it's just minor pentatonic, C minor pentatonic scale, right? But it's all about the rhythm. I play that way because I've been playing for a long time, right? That's the only difference between you and I. It's just that I've been playing decades longer. That's the only difference, you know. So I've absorbed a lot more. I've played with hundreds of musicians in hundreds of different situations and absorbed all their and I tried to absorb and steal all their knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Some, you know, but the great musicians out there will just give it to you anyway, right? We got to share this stuff. But to tie this into transcriptions, it's an incredibly important part of jazz trumpet, right? Of playing jazz. When you look at what's the Tomasi, right? What's Stan? What's the etude book that Tomasi has?
Well, Tomasi has a few etudes. I don't know if they're in a book or whatever, but he has like 6 etudes, I think.
Right.
And 3 of them are kind of work as also with piano accompaniment, I believe. I think that's what it is.
So when you look at that as a classic example, right? You then you go you play his etudes. You learn them note for note. You internalize them, and then you know, Stan goes, okay, now here you go, Tomasi concerto. You know, like I can't. I've heard that's really hard. I can't. Well, you just played all of his etudes. What do you think is going to be that different?
I heard Clark Terry thing where he said that what is it? Imitate, assimilate, and then innovate.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, and that's you got to imitate. Why not? I mean, we have the masters who have done this music already, right? The first thing we have to do is imitate that. If somebody ever comes to you and say, "Oh man, you just up there playing Clifford Brown licks," you'd be like, "Thank you. How did I do?"
Right.
You know, I mean, that's one of the greatest compliments. Are you kidding me? Would I like to sound like Clifford Brown? Yes. Would I like to sound like Freddie Hubbard? Yes, because those were masters of the music, right? Would you like to sound like Phil Smith, New York Phil, right? Would you like to sound like Maurice Andre? Would you like to sound like would you like to sound like these guys? Yes, because they're masters. Why wouldn't we? You know, they're the top of the art form, the top of the trumpet. That's what we aspire to. All right, and there's certain ways to getting to that level, right? Tons and tons of repetition, technique, tons and tons of continuous technique on the trumpet to be able to master this instrument. Then somebody slaps something down on the stand in front of you, like, okay, I can negotiate that. Oh, that's in the key of B major. Oh, that's in the key of Z double flat. Yeah, I remember practicing that for hours and hours. Okay, I can negotiate that. Oh, that's got an octave, an octave interval at like, you know, quarter note equals 216, something like crazy like that. Oh yeah, I'll do that. Well, Alan Duty will do that. You know, I'm not going to do that. But the thing is, you practice what you're going to perform, right? Another example, lead trumpet players, right? When in the blues, man, these lead trumpet players are awesome. some of the great lead trumpet players I worked with. Lisa Whitaker she was a lead trumpet player in the blues, and now she's just retiring also. But she went to be the lead trumpet player in the Army in the field band, right? The Jazz Ambassadors. One of my favorite lead players ever, cause she swings her tail off, and she's accurate. She swings. She's got all that style, right? But before concerts, you hear them in the back of the auditorium. You just hear all these high notes for like 20 minutes. Just like, man, they're going crazy. But they're doing that because they have to do that in the gig, right? Yeah. They have to go on the bandstand and do that, right? And so I was on a gig once. This is with the Metropolitan Jazz Orchestra. Jim Carroll ran. Jim Carroll was one of the jazz professors at George Mason. And we were playing with Doc Severinsen. And Doc was playing this thing, I can't remember the tune, Flying Home or some other tune that was like, it was an old style tune, it was like a rhythm changes tune, right? But it was just like, it was fast, man. It was like nasty. And I was like, man, we were talking backstage because he had the saxophone player playing this, and all of a sudden he cut off the rhythm section. It was just a saxophone for like 10 choruses. Like that. And the saxophone was like, and I said, and we were talking backstage, I said, man, I'm glad that wasn't me. And Doc said, you want to play a solo on this? I said, no. He said, you got a solo on this. I'm like, damn it. Right? This is Doc Severinsen telling you, now you're going to play on that tune where he just hung the saxophone player out to dry. But the saxophone player was Luis Hernandez, so he crushed it. Crushed it. He's in the Navy Commodores. So what did I do? That's right, Navy. So what did I do? I went to the practice room for about 40 minutes and was practicing my rhythm changes at that tempo. Was I practicing my favorite licks? Nope. Was I practicing Clifford Brown licks? Nope. What I was doing, I was practicing to get my fingers to move that fast. Period. I was playing just to simply move my fingers that fast because I hadn't played a solo that fast in a long time, right? So that's what I did on the rehearsal. And then before the gig, at home, I went home and put on some Jamie Aebersold stuff, and I just started playing fast, right? I practiced what I'm going to play in the performance, and then that helped me on the performance, right? These transcriptions are beautiful things because you're playing something that came out of someone else's mind. They didn't take time to sit down and write it out all perfectly. Like I think this would be this is very trumpet specific right here. I'm going to write this like Haydn or the Halsey Stevens or Eric Ewazen, right? These great trumpet things, right? They're not going to sit down and like they sat down and have all the time in the world. When you're improvising, you don't have that time. You're going by things that you've already practiced and your technical ability. That's why these transcriptions are so great, because you're inside the mind of someone else, right? Somebody else had a question.
Well, I had a little question. Sorry, but I don't want to interrupt any student or anything like that. But so let's say, to me, just if you just focus on transcriptions right now, there's a lot of levels of stuff you can do in the world of transcription. You can just play the notes. You can learn the head, the notes. You can learn the root movement. You can fill in the gaps, figure out what the chords are by ear. You can, then there's the difference between somebody who just plays the notes and somebody who really sounds like Clifford or Blue. And then on and on. Or you can play it in different keys. So with all those levels of difficulty, do you like say those are all worthwhile, but for the more beginning student, do only this, and then maybe a little bit more for somebody who's a little bit stronger? Or do you have maybe later on in your life come back and fill in some of those gaps? How do you go about that?
I think, you have to play what's accessible to you, right? I'm all about having the student, or having the, I don't want to say student, but having the musician starting out. I want them to sound good. I want them to hear themselves sounding good. I want them to like what they're playing, right? So I'm not going to give someone something that's just like so technically difficult that it's not enjoyable and they don't get anything from it. I don't believe in giving someone that just to say, well, you're a trumpet player and you're a senior, so you need to play this because it's super hard, right? To me, what are they learning, right? It's just, I mean, my teachers in high school, English and math and science, they gave me a lot of stuff that was just ridiculously hard, just because they had to. I don't remember any any of it, right? That's terrible. But so that's why I like giving something like, if I find a solo, like maybe a Chet Baker solo, it's really laid back, right? But Chet had a really solid groove and really solid swing, right? And even Tom Hurrell, right? Tom Hurrell is a unique type of trumpet player because in a lot of his modern records, like in the last 10 years, he'll have a tune where it's can seem complex harmonically, and he's playing like this beautiful diatonic stuff over it. Basic stuff. Basic bebop patterns and stuff over this really complicated harmonic structure. And it's like, wow, okay, well, I'm going to transcribe that, But no, I think it has to be accessible to the student, and they have to enjoy what they're playing, right? Now, yeah, the more advanced they get, I'm going to give them harder solos. I would say, you have to learn this solo. You have to learn this Freddie Hubbard bird-like solo. And which bird-like, technically, the only reason that technically that it makes, the only reason technically that any of these transcriptions can be difficult technically is for the speed. Okay? If you take, let me see what I have pulled up here. Here's another great Blue Mitchell solo, Cooking Out the Continental. Oh my gosh, Horace Silver's Finger Poppin'. That's another great record. And this is fast, so it's like that. But if I just play it, attention to it, I can play that whole solo at that tempo, and I'm sure you all could too. Even if you had to back it down a couple notches, you'll be able to play through the whole solo, and that's great. You'll learn a lot from that, right? And then as you speed it up to where your technical ability is. You match your technical ability, right? But so the Freddie Hubbard transcription, the multi-page transcription from Bird-like, is also difficult because of the speed. So you just slow down. When I did my master's degree at University of Maryland with Chris Gecker, it was awesome. I had that was 15 years ago. I did that, and he would tell me, Ken, you can play anything you want to play if you just play it slow enough. And he would do that. He would give me this book. It's a Walter Smith Top Tones book. Yeah, that book is hard, right? The first couple ones are not extremely hard, but he went straight to the back of the book to like D flat major or C sharp major or something like that, right? And all I saw was like 18 sharps on the page. I'm like, oh, right, But you play it really slow, and I can play the thing, all right? So don't get scared by some of these transcriptions, right? So play some that you can like handle, that they like I'm not even going to say this transcription is hard, that transcription is really easy. They're all different, right? But play one that you can like play at tempo, right? But you can play, and then go to some harder ones that you may not be able to play at the tempo for a while, but there's still some great content in there, and you're still getting some really, really good practicing in. Okay, and that goes along with you all playing stuff from your Arbins, playing your Clark solos, playing all your etude, all your other flexibilities, and all that kind of stuff. All this technique is all about the trumpet, Okay, because there's another etude book. I just got hit to this book, Stan. The Phil Smith concert etudes book. Oh, it's beautiful. It's like you're playing. It's like you're just playing solos, unaccompanied trumpet solos. They're called etudes, but it's like it prepares you to play other sonatas and concertos and that sort of thing. So these are things that we do, right? We got the technical stuff that we have on the trumpet, right? Ba-ba-doom, da-ba-doom, da-ba-doom, all that kind of stuff. And then we have the etudes. We have etudes that are coming from what we call the classical side of the horn, classically based etudes, right? And then we have the jazz transcriptions, the solo transcriptions, right? And that, is a must for your technical ability on the trumpet. It's a must, because if you think playing some of those Charlier etudes are hard, pick up a Clifford Brown etude where he's just going all over the place. Or, better yet, pick up a Louis Armstrong solo and try to play one of his solos from the Hot 5 and Hot 7 recordings from the mid-20s, right? Hotter Than That solo, Boku Jack solo. Try playing some of those. Incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult. But that's the challenge of the trumpet players. So
I read something from Wynton Marsalis's biography or a quote. He said that his father sent him a Louis Armstrong album to learn on his way to New York. And he had mentioned that after looking at it, he wasn't able to get through those Louis Armstrong transcriptions.
They're very hard. Louis Armstrong had an incredible range. He had very powerful range. He was a very powerful trumpet player. If you listen to the recordings from the mid-20s, you may get fooled because it took me a long time. It took me years to be able to listen to those recordings because of the recording quality. But then once I realized the stuff that he was playing and how he was playing it and how no one else was playing that way, I'm like, I was blown away. Very physical. Very physical. So, I want to ask who played the Roy Hargrove Strasbourg Saint Denis transcription?
I did.
Oh, that was you, Sydney. Okay, yeah. Stan shared that with me, so you can blame him if you're upset. He said it was wonderful. It was wonderful. Do you like Roy Hargrove stuff?
Yeah, I do. I really do.
Right. Roy Hargrove was one of my favorite. He still is one of my favorite trumpet players. Bless his soul. Really funky. He just plays from the heart. He's really one of the most extremely soulful trumpet players to ever grace us. And that was from the live recording?
No, that wasn't the live. The live one was a little bit longer, but
right. There several versions of that. And someone did a Chet Baker. Which one? Who did the Chet Baker solo?
That was he just left the group.
Oh, okay.
He just said he has to get something else done to the next class. He has to go to the next class.
Okay.
So he says thank you. That was Chris Usry with his drone videography too.
So is it Enzo Barrett? What are you working on?
Starting with some barbecue for mine. I had a question. So when doing that, I like figuring out what all the notes are, and I kind of realize a key signature for everything, but I have difficulty like finding out what the chord changes are. How do you go about figuring that out?
Well, now that's I don't, I tell you honestly, and I'll probably get some Facebook chatter telling me that that's wrong, Kenny, or you shouldn't do that, Kenny, or whatever. But I don't worry about that too much right now. I kind of learned the solo, and you can get if it's a standard tune, the chord changes are all over the place. Now, you have to have your sort of some decent piano skills, right? Down to at least go to the piano and figure out what chords are they playing. I haven't really, just because I've been playing so long, I kind of hear those progressions. A lot of them are standard type progressions, and Strutting with Some Barbecues is very standard, right? Mm-hmm. But you can also go to the piano and you figure it out. I've got I don't have solo piano skills. I don't have. You would never. You wouldn't pay me one dime to hear me play piano, but I can play through some chord progressions to accompany students. But yeah, I mean, if you're really having problems with that, you can find that. It's especially Louis Armstrong's tunes are all over the internet, and you can put that. You know, you can add that to your transcription. You know.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever just suggest to your students to just go right to, like, I mean, of course, listening to the original, but just go right to the written out Jeff Helgenson transcription or whatever, and say, just go ahead and play that and think of it as an etude rather than trying to lift it by ear?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how experienced or how fast the student works. If I know that a student has never done that before and it's going to be a really big challenge for them, then I may have them transcribe a shorter solo, but then learn something that's already published at the same time. My thing is to get them playing those lines as quickly as possible. So if I think they're going to take the entire semester or a whole month to transcribe something before they ever get to playing it, then I may have them play something else at the same time, and maybe I'll give that, you know, transcription, or writing it down. I guess if they're writing it down, yeah, I would have them do that. But if they're learning it by ear, then yeah, they can just start that right off the bat. I don't do that often, because I like to have things written down. I kind of like to sort of make them go through the whole process sometimes, and because even when you learn it, after you learn it, then sometimes I have them go back and write it down. You know, put it in the software, Finales or Sibelius, whatever you have. So you can, again, from the education side, so you can have that archive. And if you want to actually kind of see what they're playing, because I've done that before. I've taken a Jackie McLean. I've got a whole list of Jackie McLean, the great alto saxophonist, licks that he's played over different, you know, in this record, on this tune, at this timestamp, he plays this. What is that? So I may learn. It's like, oh, that's what it is. So I don't want to forget it. So maybe I'll jot it down somewhere in a manuscript book. Okay, that's what it is. He takes this augmented sound and does it this way. And sometimes for me, it helps me to see it visually. Oh, okay. Dun, dun, dun. Now I get it. You know, sort of like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I always found it difficult to internalize an entire transcription and then apply it. Like if I was going to go to a jam session, if I learned a transcript, so I always try to break it down into lines.
Well, I think here's the thing, you know, it's not about applying that even at a session, right? It's really about taking that solo. If you're going to learn it by ear, taking that solo and internalizing it. You've got it memorized, and then maybe taking that same solo and playing it over the Jamie Aebersold version of it. So it's just you and the rhythm section, right? So it's just you and the rhythm section playing it, right? Or if you do have access to a jazz combo, a jazz group or something, say, hey, let's play this tune. And then you play that solo over it. Multiple different ways of internalizing it, right? Yeah. When I realized I needed to really I really dig down deep and learn giant steps, John Coltrane's giant steps, I practiced that tune a lot. But then I played it on every gig, every jam session. I played giant steps. It must have been like probably accumulation of 20 different tempos. But I played that giant steps, and I learned some Woody Shaw licks, some Tom Hurrell licks from giant steps. I learned some Freddie Hubbard licks from giant steps. I learned John Coltrane licks from giant steps, and I learned I figured out, let me try to play some bebop over giant steps. Yeah. Let me try to play some pentatonic sounds over giant steps. I didn't know exactly where they went, but I would get on the gig and I would just spit it out and spit it out and spit it out. And I was learning on the bandstand. I did my homework at home, get the technique down, learning what the chord changes are, learning the melody, getting in my ear, and then I went to the jam session or a gig and I worked it out. Right? Now if I'm going to a gig and I'm at the Kennedy Center and my quartet's playing it, then I'm not going to be up there working stuff out, right? I'm gonna save that for like the jam session until I get comfortable enough to say, let's play jam session. I mean, let's play giant steps, right? But so. Mm-hmm.
Stan had just asked you asked a question earlier about what you would recommend teaching, like the order you would teach a student. And that you just actually went through like this whole order where you said you learn the melody, you learn the chord changes, you take some of those lines that you learned off the transcription, and you put it all together and you go off to a jam session.
Well, yeah. So I didn't transcribe an entire Woody Shaw solo playing jazz steps. I didn't transcribe the entire Freddie Hubbard jazz steps. I didn't transcribe the entire Tom Hurrell jazz. I took bits and pieces.
5 or something like that.
Yeah, I took bits and pieces of those and incorporated it into my playing and figured out why it sounded so good. Oh, okay, that's what they're playing. Oh, this is some bebop stuff they're playing, or this pattern or that pattern from this sounds, whatever, right? Yeah, and I would purposely, I wouldn't play that exact solo. If I learned an entire solo, I'm not going to go play that at a jam session. I'm not going to play their entire solo, right? But hopefully by playing that enough and practicing that enough over and over and over again, right? Then I'm going to internalize that.
Yeah.
Just by osmosis, whatever you want to call it. That's part of me now.
Yeah.
That's part of my subconscious. All that stuff is in your subconscious. It may not come out. You have to create those conditions where that's going to come out, hopefully naturally. There's been instances where I purposely wanted to incorporate certain sounds and certain patterns, what have you, or certain licks on a gig, on a particular tune. So maybe on that, we're playing Stella by Starlight. Oh, this section, I'm going to try this sound. I've been working on it. I might write myself a little note. Oh, I'm going to play this, And some of the cats back in the day would do that. You hear that. You listen to Lee Morgan play like 4 different alternate takes of a tune. And you'll hear a lot of the same material on all of those takes, right? Because you can tell that he's working out something, right? He's working out something. And eventually, by the time they get to the final take or whatever, and plus these cats have been on the road for months, and then they go into a studio. So for months, they're on the road working these things out that they're practicing at home. So you take some of these transcriptions, right? And you say, wow, I love that sound. And you internalize it. And maybe you take a little part of that. And you say, you know what? I'm going to take this. Next time I have like a small group class or a big band class in this solo, it works great for big band solos, right? You have a solo in a big band chart. I'm like, man, I'm not really sure. I just learned this transcription. There's some interesting things in it. I'm going to try to apply it to this big band solo. So you take bits and pieces of that, right? And sometimes it does mean forcing that, right? I'm going to play this lick right there. It may work, it may not. But see, eventually it's going to work itself out to where you're not sounding like you're just playing pattern number 1, pattern number 7, pattern number 13. It's going to sound like eventually it's going to work itself out. So it's not going to sound so planned, right? But again, all the little demonstrations, the little excerpts that I played today, that's not, I wouldn't say that I'm like pure improvising. It's stuff that I've learned how to play.
It's cool when you
practice, played before.
You took all those different licks from all those different artists. And I remember when I was younger, I used to always have this identity crisis where I was like, I don't want to be Clifford Brown, or I don't want to be Chet Baker.
Right.
Then I realized you take all those things, you put them in a pot, and then that's what Kenny Rittenhouse is.
Well, right.
Yeah.
And,
that unique combination.
And hopefully everybody gets their own separate pot of goodness.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. That's what we do. You take all of these. The one transcription is not going to do it. Okay, it's a cumulative effect. If you go through the whole Charlier Etude book, if you go through the whole Grant book, if you go through the whole whatever Etude books, wealth of knowledge. By the time you finish that, like an entire semester or entire school year of going through a certain process, a certain organized process, you're going to go from here to here, right? In your knowledge, in your technique, in your ability as a trumpet player, right? If you learn this transcription, it takes you let's say it takes you a week. Let's say it takes you 2 weeks, because it's just a hard and you're just a slow learner. Whatever, it doesn't make a difference. Then you play that, you internalize it, and you really make sure, like, if, like, say, a week from now, you can just pick up the horn and start playing that. Boom. Because that's what Chris Gecker would do. We would be in the lesson. He said, yeah, man, sometimes when I warm up or sometimes when I want to play, I'll just start playing one of these Charlier number 7 or Charlier number 10. He's got it memorized because he's played it and internalized it so much, right? That's the best way to learn. And then you move on to the next solo, and you move on to the next solo. Right? You go through a whole book of transcriptions, a whole book of etudes, the same thing you go through a whole record of transcriptions, right? You can say, this month I'm learning Blue Mitchell, right? Or this month I'm learning this, or this month I'm learning that. And by the way, if you hear something on a record, you're like, damn, wow, that piano player played something that was really, really cool. Then figure out what it is. Sit down and figure out those 2 or 4 bars that he played.
Even if it's not a trumpet. It could be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I lifted a West Montgomery lick, because it was awesome.
I've transcribed piano solos, It's all about learning. That's the vocabulary, okay? This is not the vocabulary. That's not the vocabulary, right? That's the cellular structure of it, right? But playing something like the... That's vocabulary, right? Or... That's a nice 2-5 lick.
I got one for you.
That's vocabulary, okay? Right. Beautiful, right?
West Montgomery.
That's right. That's right. So these are the things, right? If you hear something, boom. Oh, and I know lots of musicians who catalog their 2-5 licks. Here's my favorite 2-5 licks, right? I don't know if any of you all know Antonio Parker, great jazz alto saxophone player in this area. Great. He was on my first record. I was on one of his records. He wrote a book called, the language of jazz, right? He's got all these different volumes. This is book 12. It's major 2-5-1 patterns. The whole book is 2-5-1 patterns, right? Now, and what I tell some of my students to do is if they're going over a tune and they're playing, and I said, well, they have the thing that I wrote out, that 2-5 pattern, dominant pattern that I showed you, the PDF file that goes up the Dorian and comes down the bebop scale. I said, if you really don't know what to play, start plugging in these patterns, because eventually it's not going to sound like you're playing pattern after pattern. Right, what you do with these 2-5 licks is you start to understand the structure, and you start to understand how these musicians utilize the bebop scale, how they utilize a C major scale, right? Like if I play, that's not bebop, that's just melody, right? But where do you get that from? Well, I get it from Blue Mitchell, I get it from Louis Armstrong, I get it from Freddie Hubbard, I get it from Ellington, I get it from, Roy Eldridge. You get it from all these cats, right? Dexter Gordon, right? Keep forgetting, Coleman Hawkins, right? You get it from all these musicians, right? Right? Just simple melody, right? And if you get a handle on that, then you start adding a little bit of that bebop in there, right? And all that's a lot of like Clifford Brown, right? All that enclosures, upper, lower, chromatic stuff, enclosing this and enclosing that and all that kind of stuff. Now, a lot of that's from Clifford Brown that I got, right? I didn't know what any of that stuff was when I was playing it. Half the time I didn't even know, when I was improvising, I didn't know theoretically, oh, what is that? What is that? That's an enclosure. Or that's a bebop, or that's this or that. I didn't know. I just knew that those were the cats who played it. I learned it. That's what you play over these tunes, and I like it. And I'm going to learn how to do it better. Then I went back and realized, oh, okay. When I started teaching, I was like, oh, they got this from this, and that. You know, so those transcriptions, I can't stress it enough. It's the saturation. You got to get to the saturation point, right, Stan? I mean, it's when you're learning chromatic stuff, when you're learning the Arbenz stuff, when you're learning the Clark study, right? If you play, right, you play that stuff, then all of a sudden you can play. Let's see here. Or whatever, doing that same Clark number 2 pattern with a pentatonic or a blues, right? Right? I don't even know how it goes. I haven't done that in a long time. I can't even do it right now. I'm embarrassed. Facebook, don't hate me. But what I'm saying, if you start, it's just technique, right? You internalize that, right? It's saturation. Everybody here can play the C scale without even thinking about it. In your sleep, knocked out in the middle of the night, somebody stick a trumpet in your hand and you'll play the C scale and don't even know it. That's how much we know that, right? Because we played it a kabillion times. Imagine if you started playing augmented stuff like or something like that, right? So imagine if you played that pattern over and over and over again for like months. That's going to become a part of your playing, right? The bebop scale. Right? You start playing just up and down over and over again. That's going to become a part of your playing when you start to play bebop over some blues progressions, right? It's saturation. So that's where the transcriptions come into play. All right? You get one down, that's great. Immediately start on another, right?
I think we went over a little bit of our allotted time, but I really appreciate everybody hanging in there, the people who could hang in live and also in Facebook land. And I can't say how much I'm really grateful for you spending some time with my studio, Kenny, and talking about this stuff. And it's just really an ocean of material. It can't be done in 1 hour. It can't be done in 6 months. But I think we got a good start a little bit just by listening to what you have to say. Is awesome. And it's great to see Alan here also from the